Hello and thank you for joining us for Inside the Americas. I'm Tom Burgess-Watson. Coming up in this edition, deadly tornadoes tear through 5 US states in the Midwest and the South. Kentucky sees the worst of the damage and more than 70 fatalities. Canada sets aside billions of dollars in compensation for victims of the residential school system, which separated Indigenous children from their families. And Mexico bids farewell to the legendary singer Vicente Fernandez, who's died at the age of 81. We begin in Kentucky, the state that was worst affected by a cluster of perhaps the most devastating tornadoes in US history, which struck parts of central and southern areas of the United States. Well, in Kentucky alone, more than 70 people are known to have been killed by the severe weather system, and deaths were also reported in Arkansas, Illinois, Missouri, and Tennessee. These are some of the striking images of the week. Well, the US President Joe Biden, who has signed a disaster declaration for Kentucky, called the situation there an unimaginable tragedy. Well, let's take a closer look now at the scale of the damage.
This is what's left of their home. As the rest of the country gears up to celebrate Christmas, the Humphrey family are now homeless. At just 13, Andrew has had to grow up fast.
I'm not really worried about Christmas or presents like that. More worried about getting a home. But we have places that we're staying. We're lucky to have that. You know, like I said, luckily we weren't injured badly at all.
The tornadoes destroyed most of Dawson Springs and a total of about 1,000 properties across Kentucky. AccuWeather estimates that the total cost of the damage could reach about $18 billion, which would make this the most expensive tornado outbreak in US history. A major disaster has been declared in the state, which unlocks extra federal aid for recovery efforts. The funding includes grants for temporary housing and home repairs, as well as low-cost loans to help uninsured property owners. In the meantime, hundreds of people are now in shelters, including at this community centre in Wingo.
Your town doesn't even look like a town anymore. It's nothing but rubble, you know? There's everything that you love and all the memories that you have and all the buildings, as stupid as that might sound. Some of those buildings, they carry your story. They carry your memories.
A number of businesses were also flattened, and employees continued to work despite storm warnings being issued, including at an Amazon warehouse and a candle factory. Workers at the factory say they tried to seek shelter from the tornadoes, but were told to return to work or be fired. Several employees were then killed in the storm. The company denies any wrongdoing. The Kentucky Division of Occupational Safety and Health Compliance will be investigating the factory deaths in the coming months.
Meanwhile, the Caribbean nation of Haiti has been observing a period of national mourning following a massive explosion which killed at least 75 people. This happened on Tuesday when a petrol tanker overturned in Cap-Haïtien, which is in the north of the country, engulfing cars and homes in flames. Well, a shortage of medical supplies and health workers has made matters even more complicated in the ongoing effort to treat the injured. Well, this is the latest tragedy to strike Haiti, and it comes just 4 months after a deadly earthquake and 5 months after the assassination of the country's president. Canada is setting aside a compensation fund of more than 40 billion Canadian dollars for the Indigenous children who were victims of the residential school system, which separated them from their families. At those schools, which were operational as recently as the 1990s, some 55,000 children, possibly many more, were believed to have been malnourished, beaten, and sexually abused. Well, earlier this year, hundreds of unmarked graves were discovered at the sites of some of these former residential schools.
Forging a path forward to heal a painful chapter in Canadian history. The government has pledged 40 billion Canadian dollars in compensation for Indigenous children who suffered mistreatment and discrimination while in foster care. Between 1874 and 1996, 150,000 children were taken from their families and placed in state-run boarding schools, where students were forced to abandon their native languages and convert to Christianity, a policy that has left deep wounds in Indigenous communities.
Kids that tried to escape, they were always found and brought back by the police. They didn't say where they were after they got sick and passed. So as a grandmother, a mother, and a great-grandmother, you think of all of those mothers that are hurting inside. And I feel that pain for them because I have children. It was cruel here.
Many children were malnourished, beaten and sexually abused. Fresh demands for justice were sparked in May after the discovery of the remains of 215 Indigenous children at the former site of Canada's largest residential school. Since then, more than 1,300 unmarked graves have been found.
The families and the communities were not properly informed of the fate of the children who did not make it home. We believe this is one such situation of mass human rights violations, and we are concerned it might reflect criminal behavior, including suggesting violations of humanitarian law and genocide.
Around 55,000 people removed from their homes as children are set to receive 40,000 Canadian dollars each in compensation. The government, meanwhile, has vowed to reform the foster care system and fix widespread social problems that lead to situations in which children are taken from their parents. A deal still needs to be made by the end of the year. If reached, it would end a 14-year legal battle.
Okay, so now to our number of the week, which is 2,977. That's because history was made this week during an NBA match between the Golden State Warriors and the New York Knicks at Madison Square Gardens. This as the star player Stephen Curry broke the league's record, becoming the greatest shooter the NBA has ever seen. 33-year-old Curry has now broken the three-point record set by legendary player Ray Allen, who remained unchallenged in the top spot for about a decade. There's been an outpouring of grief in Mexico following on from the death of the much-loved singer Vicente Fernandez, who died on Sunday after a series of health complications. For some, he was simply known as El Rey, the King, and he had a huge following, not just in Mexico, but much further afield as well. He was 81 years old.
Vicente Fernandez was known as the king of Mexican ranchera music, a crooner famed for his wide sombreros, signature moustache, and traditional songs of love and heartbreak, belted out against a backdrop of mariachi guitars and trumpets. Fernandez was born in the western Mexican state of Jalisco, the cradle of mariachi music. In a career spanning 50 years, he sold more than 70 million albums, appeared in dozens of films, and drew 90,000 fans for his farewell tour 5 years ago. The singer won 3 Grammys and 9 Latin Grammys. After his passing at the age of 81 was announced on Sunday, fans gathered in front of his ranch near Guadalajara to pay tribute to the undisputed master of the rancheras.
Don Vicente Fernández merece toda nuestra admiración y respeto porque es un ícono que dio la cara por México con la música. Y a hoy que nos deja un hueco muy grande que alguien debe de llenar.
Among those who've paid homage to Fernandez are the Mexican president and US President Joe Biden, who said that the artist would be remembered for generations to come.
And we end in Mexico with a report about the fascinating creature, which also happens to be the emblem of Mexico. The axolotl looks a little bit like an aquatic dragon, but this amphibian is in critical danger of extinction and has almost entirely disappeared from its natural environment. The France 24 team in Mexico went to find out more.
The Aztecs once worshipped it as a god. The axolotl is an endemic salamander living in Mexico. For 20 years, this laboratory has conducted a conservation program of the species. The biologists take care of around 130 specimens that grew up and live here.
These will soon turn 5. We have some axolotls who already lived on the outside, but some others were born here with us.
Researchers are fascinated by the little animal. Its DNA is 10 times richer than that of humans, and its faculties are astonishing.
The axolotl can regenerate damaged tissue all over its body, gills, eyes, even a part of its brain. If it loses a piece, it can in time recreate it.
But this superpower is no help in the face of the threat of extinction. The axolotl is critically endangered.
The axolotl is highly resistant. It can survive many things, but the area of Xochimilco is so damaged that the axolotl can no longer live there. The best for the axolotl and the whole city would be to restore its habitat.
This is the axolotl's natural environment. In southern Mexico City, the Chinampas of Xochimilco are a canal system where people live and cultivate. This landscape is a pre-Hispanic legacy, but today, rapid urbanization and contamination are a threat. Jesus Correa was born here. For over 30 years, his family has worked to preserve the axolotls.
It's a part of our ecosystem. I grew up with them.
Jesus raises axolotls with water from the canals. But that doesn't mean he will release the animals. Carps and tilapias would immediately eat them, two human-introduced species who took over the area in recent years.
Xochimilco's deterioration is tremendous, and urban sprawl doesn't make things easier. Xochimilco will probably be completely dried up. People who used to live in the Chinampas will leave, and the environment that held the axolotl will disappear. It's highly uncertain that we will someday be able to reintroduce axolotls.
In the meantime, Jesus tries his best to protect the species and to carry on the tradition of Xochimilco's canals, the green lung of the Mexican capital.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Inside the Americas. We hope to see you again soon here on France 24.